So, Christian, we talked a little bit about the topic that many people like to use social media for communication with each other. And what I hear you say is that the real proximity, the closeness between people, and the real connection is better when we are in a room together, face to face, like we are now.
Yeah.
And could you maybe share more of your thoughts and experiences and research you've done on this topic?
Okay. First chapter is hominids, like Neanderthals, early Homo sapiens, perhaps even Homo erectus. There were very few people who lived in this world. There were no roads, there was no compass, there was no settlements. They were all nomads, and they were moving around in small groups, right? But archaeology has found out that these small groups were too small to survive on their own. And especially if they had children, they could have malformations and things like that, inbreeding. Right? So they had to do something about it. But they were surrounded by jungles and deserts and God knows what. But they did move. And they moved very far.
You mean they wandered?
They wandered, yeah. They moved by foot.
Yes.
Without the instruments and the Googles and nothing.
Amazing, yeah.
And they moved for hundreds of kilometers.
Yes.
For instance, there's a place in the Channel, in the British Channel, very near Normandy, where they found like a sculpture of bones, of mammoth bones and other bones, and it wasn't a burial, it wasn't a settlement, and it wasn't anything where you could say they were staying there, but they met there. They went there from all over the place.
Okay.
And perhaps they didn't speak the same language, but they wanted to meet. They wanted to be together. They probably wanted to tell each other about how they lived, but they couldn't, so they sang or they danced.
Okay.
And they had various communications on the spot, which we would call perhaps festivals or so. There was no necessary religious thing. Nobody had to be buried. It was meeting places. And in South Africa, in Brazil, they found a place where such a meeting place was marked by a fireplace. And they dug down through the coal, very far down, and they found out that people had been going there for tens of thousands of years. With the same need, not to pray, not to bury, not to fight, but to be together. Different groups.
So you're saying be together, you mean talk with each other?
Well, perhaps they talked, we don't know.
But
they communicated face to face. And they lived all over the place, kilometers and kilometers away from each other, but there was one spot where they returned again and again and again for thousands of years. And that, to me, is what I call the we paradox.
Yes.
You need each other, but you need also the distance between each other, right? And there's a beautiful parable by Schopenhauer of the porcupines. You know, the ones with the long spines? The porcupines, he says, and he wants to define this sense of we paradox, right? He says porcupines in winter, the family goes and lives together, and it gets colder and colder, and they move closer and closer until they prick each other, right?
Okay.
And then they move away for again. Then it gets cold, so they have to find the right kind of distance between too much proximity and too much distance. And I love that paradox because not only did my father tell this story, but it has stuck in my mind as a sort of symbolic philosophical approach to this problem of proximity and distance, right?
So,
And I'll tell you, I've been following all the documentations, not only archaeological, but also cultural. For instance, there is a marketplace in Ethiopia, still existing, every Monday.
Every Monday.
Every Monday. And it's in the foothills.
Okay.
You know, Ethiopia has very high places like Addis Ababa, 2,500 meters high,
Okay.
and very low under sea level in the Danakil desert where the nomads live, right?
Okay.
Every Sunday evening, the nomads move up into the foothills where the farmers live, and they bring their stuff to the market. They deposited, in those days when I was there, they deposited their weapons in a little hut on Sunday evening. The next day, they traded, they bought and sold their wares. They met people from other tribes to marry, right? And there was never any fighting. And then in the evening, the market finished, and they all went their way. When there was a drought, this is very important, when there was a drought, and very often in the Danakil there's a drought, the nomads would come with their weapons to the same area and start fighting for food with the farmers who were settled. So the same people had this survival principle of meeting, sharing, trading, and even sort of communicating, but then being very separate, right? So, and there are markets all over the world.
Yes.
And many people like myself, we go to markets not because we need something, but because the market is a place where you sort of, you know, you're in contact with very different human beings, and you are there. It's like an atmosphere of this is where we're not going to fight, and it's not only a place where you buy things. It's a place where you observe different people, and the more different the people are, the nicer the market is.